This is a reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 1 and on. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour is not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So I want to use this great story in the Bible here in the Gospel of John to sort of talk about self-improvement. For a little context, right now I'm 21. When I was like 17 or 18, I really got into this idea of self-improvement, secular self-improvement, working on myself, lifting, meditating, journaling, cold showers, trying to be more social, trying somehow to talk to girls, although that didn't really work out, especially back then with that approach. But self-improvement without Christ. Granted, it was sort of focused at trying to remove the issue or addiction or the vice of pornography and masturbation and lust in my life, but I went about it in a very secular way, following like purely secular advice. And more importantly, when looking for improvement, I looked inward. I looked what I wanted, what I felt was best for me, ways I could improve myself to rid the vice, but it was all kind of self-focused. And through this, I felt quite empty. I still went to mass. I would still talk about faith every once in a while with my friends. I would still make an attempt to pray at the end of a long day at night, which would kind of just be muttered into some mindless rote prayers. But I tried. But through this self-improvement, I would say never really fully took off, and always felt empty, like I was missing something. Fast forward, now I am striving like day in and day out to make Christ the center of my life. Most of my prayers end with "Thy will be done," and trying to focus on God and keep that as the center of my life. And with that, the improvement has come, but in a much different and more fulfilling way. Like, yes, obviously you can still journal, cold shower, and meditate, and see great improvement with that. But for a sense, when missing God and when missing God's will, which we'll talk about in this passage, it's all for naught, or it's not all for naught, but it's quite empty, and it's not the ultimate transformation that you can have if you invited God into your life and align your will with his will. So why do I like this passage for making this point? The line, his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So again, true improvement is not following our will and like sticking to that rigidly and willingly, through thick and thin, although obviously there's an element of discipline regardless of, secular faith, whatever. But true improvement, our water turns to wine. Like, the best improvement happens when we align our will to God's, when we do not what we want, but what he wants. When we follow this commandment, do whatever he tells you. That is where the true magic is. And the other point I really like about this too is the idea of water to wine, where there is a miracle taking place, like water is changing to wine, like that doesn't normally happen. So first off, Jesus, it says Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding, so God is being invited in, and then they're asking the mother of God, Mary, hey, like, we got no wine, we got to figure it out, and she is pointing them towards Jesus. She is pointing them to follow God's will. Do whatever he tells you. Jesus says, fill the jars with water. And this next point, like, I really, really like. Jesus says, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. So, I've kind of been in these debates, like in some Bible studies, where people are like, oh, like, how much of it is like God working or you working? Like, what's the balance there? One of my friends made a good point. He said, you can pray all you want to make the bus on time, but you may have to run to the bus stop. Said more like theologically or eloquently, I believe it's attributed to St. Augustine saying, work as if everything depends on you, pray as if everything depends on God. So it's like God in the famous Michelangelo painting of the creation of Adam, God is always fully there. Like God's finger is reaching out fully stretched like this, whereas Adam is just kind of like lingering like that. But all he has to do is reach out a bit more. But God's putting in the effort. And the call is on us to respond to his will fully, to fill the jars to the brim. So it's not in following God's will. It's not a negation. It's not a passivity into a waiting around. Like, for the water to become wine, they needed to fill, and to get the most out of that, they filled the jars to the brim. They still put in the effort, and that's why it's not as much a negation of secular self-improvement when talking about faith, as these habits and ideas do help, like getting a good night's sleep, eating clean, lifting, feeling healthy, good social circle, journaling. They help you bring your best forward. They help you to fill the jars to the brim, if you will, like using this analogy here. However, like just doing that on your own accord, for your own ideas and for what you want, you end up with water, you don't get wine, right? It's a combination and a welding of the two, if you will, where first it starts with Christ, first it starts with his will, and then in a way to follow that path the best way you can, to have the most energy, feel the best, like sleep, like stuff like that. These secular habits, journaling, meditating, all that stuff is great when it's on the right path, dedicated to the right thing, and starting more importantly with Christ, seeking first the kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things will be added up to you. I hope this makes sense. Again, the title is probably going to be something like secular self-improvement versus faith. And again, it's faith first. That's the name of the channel right now. I probably will change it down the line. But faith first. God's will. Finding or trying to see day in and day out what that is, how that changes for you, what God is calling you, and then still putting forth your full effort. And in putting forth your full effort, in putting forth your full self, that is where there is an element of, these healthy habits that help you fill the jars to the brim as much as you can. Yeah, so I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, that's the point. That's where the magic is. We can work as hard as we want and just end up with water. But if we align our will with God's and work as hard as we can and fill our jars all the way in alignment with God's will, that's when water can turn to wine. And a more transformative improvement is able to take place. Water to wine by following God's will and giving your all. That's it. Take care. God bless.